A truck hit a man and he woke up in a new body as Grace Auvergne. Though now the daughter of Duke Auvergne, his mind remained that of a 52-year-old bureaucrat from Japan. After falling off a horse and knocking her head, something triggered. Memories came rushing back. Surrounded by others concerned about the fall, he realized with dread that this world was the setting of a dating sim filled with beautiful male characters. Yes, it was unmistakably an Odom game. His final memory from Earth was pushing a child out of the way of an oncoming truck. And now here he was, reincarnated in another world. But why him? Kenzaburo Tandabayashi, middle-aged government office worker, reborn as a nobleman's daughter in a dating sim. It felt like the gods were playing some twisted joke on him. Sure, he was familiar with the whole isekai genre thanks to his otaku background. But when it came to Odom games, he didn't know the first thing. How in the world was he supposed to make it through this? Suddenly, Josette, one of the maids, entered the room in a fluster, nervous sweat beading on her forehead. She brought in a fresh outfit for Lady Grace. Grace gave a polite thank you, which startled the servant so badly she bumped into the door while backing out, leaving the clothes behind and hurrying off. Though now Grace, he still remembered everything from before. Apparently, the girl he now inhabited had a cold and domineering personality, constantly reprimanding the staff and never offering thanks, which meant his current role was none other than the notorious villainess in the game's story. His memory flashed to a scene on TV. Grace herself yelling, "Know your place, commoners don't belong at this academy." That was the exact moment when Kenzaburo had seen his daughter Hanako playing the game. Magical Academy, Love and Beast, on the family TV. The visuals made it obvious it was a romance game, with all those dreamy male characters on the box art, so he had teasingly poked fun at her for playing it in public. His daughter, a proud otaku, eagerly told him about Grace, the girl who constantly opposed the protagonist. Kenzaburo had chimed in, noting how these curly-haired rivals had existed for decades in anime. Yumi Himekawa from Glass Mask, Madame Butterfly from Aim for the Ace, and Elisa Lagan from Candy Candy. The guy was from a different era. His daughter couldn't make sense of half of what he was going on about. But when he matched his current surroundings to that memory, everything aligned. This truly was the Odom game his daughter had been playing. He was now Grace Auvergne, the infamous antagonist, and today marked his first day at the Royal Academy of Magic. While on campus, he spotted a girl with bright pink hair and eyes full of hope, who promptly tripped and smashed face first into the ground. In that moment, he recognized the type, a clumsy heroine, instantly crafted to win the player's affection. Anna Dole was unmistakably the heroine of the story. Kenza clearly remembered his daughter telling him how excited Anna had been to start her first day at the academy. But Grace, being of noble blood, had stood in her way simply because Anna was a commoner, something rare at a school filled with aristocrats. Initially, Grace had scolded Anna for overstepping her social rank, even going so far as to insult her family, which had brought Anna to tears. That encounter was what inspired Anna to work tirelessly on her magic to prove Grace wrong. Recalling all this, Kenza still couldn't understand why he, of all people, had been dropped into this game's world. With Grace confronting Anna, the surrounding students whispered nervously, all aware that Grace's family was second in power, only to the royal family itself. Grace remembered that Anna had topped the academy entrance exams. But instead of following the script and belittling her, he said that her parents must be incredibly kind, wise, and supportive. Oh no, he'd let his real thoughts as a father slip, completely forgetting to keep up his villainous act. Anna lowered her gaze, crying, not out of shame, but from joy. She was moved to hear such kindness from someone of Grace's status. Grace froze. Meanwhile, the watching students got the wrong idea, assuming he had been cruel. So he quickly grabbed Anna and led her away. They sat down together on a bench, and Anna apologized for breaking down like that. She explained how her family had never been wealthy, but once they discovered she had a gift for magic, they saved every coin they could to send her here. She was grateful for their sacrifice, and for Grace's unexpectedly kind words. Grace then offered a different perspective. While Anna knew she should work hard and find a good career to repay her parents, Grace suggested something else, that she should nurture her gift and live a fulfilling, happy life. That, he thought, is what any loving parent would truly want for their child. Anna gasped and agreed wholeheartedly. Her parents had already told her that very thing. As she wiped her tears again, a blonde boy appeared and joked about Grace making someone cry on the first day. Kenza recognized him from Grace's own memories. He was one of the game's main love interests. At present, he was not only Grace's fiancé, but also the crown prince of the nation, though Kenza couldn't recall his name. trying to keep up the conversation. Kenza struggled mentally to retrieve the prince's name. It wasn't that he'd never learned it. He just had too many names rattling around in his 52-year-old head to recall the right one on command. Thankfully, Anna greeted the prince herself, giving Grace a brief moment of relief. The prince congratulated her on her impressive exam results, but frustratingly still didn't mention his name. Of course, this fit the etiquette Kenza remembered. Nobles of high rank never introduced themselves first. That meant Grace now had to introduce the prince to Anna, or else the situation would feel awkward. Grace politely introduced herself using her full noble title, and then subtly clued Anna in on the identity of the young man standing beside them. Anna gasped in excitement and immediately addressed him by his full name. His Royal Highness, Crown Prince Virgil Vierge. It was exactly the cue Grace had been hoping for. The prince gave a quick reminder not to be late for the entrance ceremony before making his exit. That remark jogged Kenza's memory. His daughter once explained how, in the game's storyline, Grace would insult Anna, making her cry alone in the courtyard. That's when Prince Virgil would appear to comfort her. It was the essential first flag for the prince's romantic route. Now Kenza wondered if he'd accidentally triggered that exact sequence. Still, Anna seemed thrilled simply because Grace had introduced her as a friend. Then, when Anna asked if she could start calling her Miss Grace, Kenza began to panic, worried he might have set off a completely different event path. Kenza strolled through the school corridors, feeling rather pleased with himself. No one had suspected that the graceful young noblewoman was actually a middle-aged man on the inside. Just then, an elderly gentleman in a mage's robe greeted him warmly. Drawing from Grace's memories, Kenza recognized him as the principal. Reacting instinctively, he greeted the principal as he would have back in his old life. Translated through Grace's body, that meant delivering a polished curtsy and offering a refined, "Good day." He gave himself an internal high five. He jokingly called this talent of his the elegant cheat skill. And so, Grace delivered the opening speech as the freshman representative, just as shown at the beginning of the game. Up to this point, everything was going by the book, and honestly, Kenza felt a little excited. He really wanted to learn magic. But a new problem was forming. The heroine seemed to like him, even though he was supposed to be her adversary. As Anna continued to chatter away, he reminded her to quiet down until the teacher's lecture began. She apologized instantly, while Kenza reflected on whether his tone had sounded villainous enough. It wasn't easy being harsh to someone so cheerful and kind. But if he was to stay in character, he had to pull it off convincingly. Meanwhile, Anna's heart fluttered. She was deeply impressed that Grace had taken the time to correct her. It meant so much coming from a noblewoman she'd only just met. She saw Grace not as a snob, but as someone truly graceful and refined. Anna made a silent vow to work harder so she wouldn't disgrace her noble peer. From her view, Grace looked absolutely dignified, flipping through the textbook, eyes shifting between the pages and the podium. Anna thought she must be visualizing how class would unfold. To her, Grace was incredible, but in reality, Kenza was remembering how his fingers always used to slip on the pages when reading, forcing him to lick them constantly just to turn a page properly. In his former life, Kenza struggled with farsightedness and sluggish eye focus. Close-up reading had always been a hassle. But now, in the body of the 15-year-old Grace, his vision was flawless. It felt incredibly freeing, even as Anna focused intently on mimicking her every move. The teacher suddenly conjured a cabinet before the class. She began calling out names, instructing each student to approach and take an egg from within. Elsewhere, in the prince's private quarters, his close friend Auguste Lyon dropped by for a casual conversation. Auguste was curious. Had Virgil decided which first-year students to bring onto the student council? Virgil replied that candidates would be selected based on academics, family standing, and personality. He specifically mentioned Anna Dole, praising her top-ranking entrance exam score, and also named Grace, citing both her grades and noble lineage. Auguste had no objections to Grace's abilities, though he described her as extremely rigid. He wasn't sure someone like her could get along with a commoner such as Anna. At first, the prince had shared that concern, but he now suspected Grace might be undergoing some sort of change. He planned to keep an eye on her before finalizing his decision. Later, in the school cafeteria, Anna was visibly thrilled to learn they could eat as much as they liked. Grace, though equally delighted by the idea of unlimited food, held his noble composure. Using what he called his elegant cheat technique, he conveyed admiration for the buffet in a poised and dignified way. Their attention was soon drawn to a commotion nearby, 3 girls complaining to the staff. The trio were upset they had to carry their own meals. since personal servants weren't allowed on campus. They argued their parents were counts and expected special treatment. The staff member calmly explained that academy policy emphasized self-reliance. All students, regardless of birth, were expected to manage their daily affairs independently. It was a core principle of the school's philosophy. Kenza inwardly sighed. The girls weren't acting like proper villainesses. They were just spoiled and entitled. He made a mental note Grace should never behave like them. He asked Anna to follow his lead as he carried his own tray. This small gesture earned praise from the cafeteria staff, while the three noble girls stood by, stunned and flustered. Grace found the food to be genuinely tasty. The embarrassed trio quietly exited, clearly shaken. While eating, Kenza reflected on the odd blend of eras. This world resembled 19th century Europe in look, but the food quality and cleanliness were closer to modern Japan. This wasn't some fantasy backdrop. These were real people with thoughts and feelings. And so, he vowed to treat both teachers and classmates with genuine respect. His upbringing as a working-class man had instilled in him the habit of eating everything served and always expressing gratitude for the meal. He handed over his empty tray with a warm smile and asked the staff to please thank the chef for such an excellent meal. The girls around him stared in awe. Grace's refined yet heartfelt manners left a lasting impression. That moment sparked something much larger. Her etiquette set a new trend at the academy. Students began imitating her, and it would eventually evolve into a long-standing tradition. And so, the whimsical isekai journey of Kenzaburo Tandabayashi, a 52-year-old civil servant, truly began. Each morning, he groomed himself with care, just as he had when heading to work back home. One day, as he exchanged greetings with his daughter, he noticed the "Love and Beast" mug she was holding. Pride welled up in him. It reminded him of the values he'd passed down to her. They shared a gleeful fist bump, celebrating the belief that merchandise truly comes to life when it's actually used, not just stored away. Of course, they had also bought extras to keep pristine. As he stepped outside, Kenza admired the modern, stylish design on the merch, even if he couldn't quite make out the writing. He always preferred using the stairs to maintain his fitness. By raising the arm and leg on the same side without twisting his torso, he moved efficiently with minimal effort, a trick he picked up from a martial arts manga he was fond of. At the city government office, Kenza would sort documents with his trusty abacus, eat the same cafeteria curry every day, and never forget to thank and praise the cook. During a planning meeting about a new traffic safety poster, his coworkers suggested using characters from a popular anime to attract attention. But Kenza became overly invested in the idea. He passionately argued that making the characters too cheerful would betray the spirit of the original series. His rant was intense and fast-paced, leaving his colleagues stunned. By 5 p.m., another workday had wrapped up. He never complained, accepted any task without fuss, and was content with his routine. That very evening, however, he was struck by a truck while pushing a child to safety. Now reincarnated in another world, he resolved to live responsibly as the person he'd become. Yet he still wasn't sure what his purpose here really was. So far, he had managed to blend in with this world based on an Otome game. His biggest hurdle was that he didn't know much about such games. But one thing stood out. The handsome guys were clearly the romantic targets. As student council president, the prince introduced his companions. There was Auguste, head of security, Richard Verseau, the vice president, and Pierre Jamax, the secretary. All three were second-year students. He also noted that the girls would be introduced to the remaining members later on. Kenza recognized the boys instantly. They were on the cover of Love and Beast. He quickly deduced the game's main goal, the heroine Anna, was supposed to fall in love with one of these eligible bachelors. And his role, as Grace, was to stand in the way of those relationships. Anna lit up with excitement upon learning that both she and Grace were being invited to join the student council. Kenza, however, was more preoccupied with figuring out how to block Anna's romantic progress. That was his main concern. Anna, ever modest, questioned whether it was appropriate for a commoner like her to join the council. Grace replied that members were selected by the president based on academic performance and family background, since Anna had ranked highest on the entrance exam. Even as a commoner, that was all the proof she needed of her abilities. Auguste was caught off guard. He had expected Grace to say something more like, it would disgrace the school to let a commoner into the student council. That's when Kenza realized he'd made a slip. He'd delivered a fair and neutral assessment, just like he used to do in performance evaluations back at work. He really wished Anna would quit giving him that, "So you were serious about calling me your friend" expression. He needed to collect himself. Right now he was Grace Auburn, the noble antagonist. It wasn't enough to just block the heroine from her romantic paths. As he plotted, a sly laugh escaped. He then told Anna that if she truly wanted to be on the student council, she'd need to learn all about noble customs and high-class behavior, and he'd personally make sure she mastered every last detail. That was it. Kenza had locked in the perfect haughty villainous tone. But the moment he added that he'd fully educate her on aristocratic etiquette, he could tell right away that he really wasn't cut out for playing the part of a villain. Anna replied excitedly, promising to give it her all, her body giving off a quick sparkle. The prince, praising Grace's excellent efforts, also began to glow. One by one, the rest of the boys lit up as well. Was this some kind of Odom game affection point mechanic? Outside the council room, as Anna buzzed with energy about her new student council duties, Kenza started wondering which romantic storyline she'd fall into. Would it be Prince Virgil, the ripped security guy, the tall, quiet one with long hair, or the sharp-eyed, dark-haired perfectionist? Honestly, Kenza couldn't keep all these overly exotic names straight. During their outdoor lesson, they had their first hands-on magic class using summoning circles. The instructor demonstrated how to write spells within the circle, using an ancient magical script. She cast a light magic spell, forming shimmering particles in the air. A curious student asked why they didn't just use everyday words. The teacher explained that if non-magic users read the spells, their stray thoughts could weaken the magic. From this, Anna realized that to unlock a spell's full strength, it must be written in words known only to the caster. The teacher elaborated further. Magic circles channeled the innate energy of language, a force that lived within the words themselves. However, for a word to hold power, it needed history, passed down and used by many over time. That's why the strongest magic came from ancient tongues no longer in common use. Kenza's brain sparked with an idea. He wrote the Japanese kanji for fire, reasoning that since this Odom world didn't have kanji, the word should be unique. Then he added another, and suddenly, a fierce blaze erupted, earning him praise and another glow from Anna. But another student, sitting in the back, clearly jealous, scoffed at Grace's spell, claiming it was nothing compared to what he'd learned from his private magic tutor. As Anna proudly showed off her glowing circle, distant shouting erupted, students panicking as a massive golem emerged and began rampaging. Apparently, the jealous student had overloaded the golem with magic and fainted. The creature was now drawn toward Anna's magic. Kenza sprang into action, quickly borrowing Anna's circle and casting a pause spell to freeze the golem in its tracks. A flawless save. While the teacher tore into the unconscious student for his recklessness, Kenza breathed a sigh of relief. He had rushed his spell and made a small mistake in the character. Though the spell he cast was misspelled as pause with a Z, it surprisingly still worked in this world. Meanwhile, back at the Auburn household, Gisette, the maid in training, was deep in thought about Miss Grace's recent strange behavior. The sudden kindness had her suspicious. Grace, known for her angelic looks and devilish heart, might be planning something. Recently, other staff had also noticed Grace seemed oddly composed, but they felt it wasn't genuine tranquility. It felt more like the eerie quiet before something exploded. Maybe she had already decided to let the staff go and was just being nice until the moment she dropped the news. Like fattening a pig before slaughter. That idea terrified Josette. She was convinced she'd be the first to go since she was always making mistakes. Like the time she accidentally smashed a tea kettle in front of Grace. Kenza tried to comfort her, but Gisette burst into tears, panicked that this mistake meant she'd be sold off. She pleaded to at least be sent to a place where she could still work as a maid. And if Grace planned to eat her, she warned she wouldn't even taste good. Kenza was confused until he pieced together the servants' chatter and remembered his own parenting experience. Gently, he reassured Josette that he'd never sell her. Everyone slips up sometimes, and especially a trainee was bound to stumble more than others. If he fired everyone for making mistakes, then no one would ever learn to be a proper maid. Josette still felt unsure if her blunder was truly forgiven. Kenza figured her confusion stemmed from Grace's previously harsh behavior, making the sudden gentleness hard to process. To show her he meant it, he offered her some sweets, but that just puzzled her even more. Suspicion, nervousness, hesitation, all of it tangled in her head until she bit into the cookie. In that instant, every ounce of fear melted away. Later, Grace brought the damaged kettle to Meister Walls for repairs. He was a dwarf and the official craftsman of the Auburn family. One look at it, and he declared it could be fixed in 20 minutes. Kenza stayed to observe, fascinated by the repair process. Dwarves were the most skilled artisans in any fantasy realm, And now watching up close, he started to question whether this world was more than just a dating game. When the kettle was restored, Josette was stunned. It looked untouched, as if nothing had happened. The maester remarked he hadn't seen Grace in quite some time and got excited working on her request. He recalled how, as a child, she'd often visit his workshop and watch him with such interest. Kenza remembered that too. Grace used to love watching artisans and gardeners work, but once she began formal lady training, she gradually stopped. It wasn't considered ladylike, so she forced herself to change. Over time, she became stricter toward others and toward herself, making things tough even for the servants. That was what pushed her down the path of a villainess, yet deep down, her nature had always been much kinder. Taking in the cozy charm of the shop, she asked Walls if she could return sometime, to which he reminded her, with a smile, that this was her own mansion's garden. She was welcome anytime. Later on, Grace asked him to craft her an abacus. The Royal Magic Academy formed the backdrop of the romance game, Magical Academy, Love and Beast. Its student council, led by Prince Virgil, was an elite circle of carefully selected students. But Kenza found it impossible to remember who was who without jotting their names on a cheat sheet. Still, this institution catered to nobility. The council members were chosen for their abilities and their rank. Their job was to lead the student body before stepping into important political roles that would one day help run the country, which also made them perfect love interests. Kenza became particularly fixated on one quirky pattern in these games. All the romantic candidates had hairstyles that seemed to hog memory space. Their hairdos were leagues above those of the minor characters, which made Kenza suspect that elaborate hair was a sign of high status and popularity in this setting. Could that actually be true? With that in mind, he figured Anna's preferences in hair would seriously affect who she'd end up dating. So, playing as Grace, with his shiny hair fluttering majestically in the breeze, he asked Anna what she thought of men with thick, immaculately styled hair. Her eyes sparkled. She confessed she admired people with stunning, flowing locks, though that didn't mean they shared the same taste. So now, Kenza was placing his bets on Anna choosing the vice president with the luscious mane. Meanwhile, Anna was wondering how Lady Grace managed to keep her curls so bouncy and perfect. Still, Kenza's main wish was simply for Anna to wind up with someone who brought her real happiness. He recalled his daughter once telling him that the hardest character to win over in the game was Prince Virgil. At first glance, the guy came off as warm and friendly with everyone. But being the heir to the throne, he couldn't help but view people through the lens of how valuable they were to the realm. That's why the main heroine had to stand out with her skills in the student council just to catch his interest. Kenza figured that must be tough for both the heroine and the prince. After all, if Virgil judged even romantic partners that way, then being the future king had to be mentally exhausting. While watching Anna and Grace work on the council's finances, the prince sized them up just as expected. He especially noticed that Grace had grown friendlier lately. He didn't know what brought the change, but saw it as a pleasant surprise. Naturally, he couldn't put her out of his mind. She was, after all, his betrothed. Still, their union was more about duty to the kingdom than affection. Even though they'd grown up side by side, he'd never seen her through a romantic lens. He accepted their engagement as the logical path forward, born to inherit the throne. He believed a partner who contributed to the realm's prosperity was all he could really ask for. When Anna hit a wall with the numbers, Kenza introduced his latest tool, a so-called calculator from the distant east. It was actually an abacus crafted by their household's finest artisan. Grace, using it with ease, breezed through the financials, though Kenza privately admitted he had no idea how to explain it. Anna watched, genuinely impressed by Grace's sudden knack for numbers, even as Kenza muttered to himself about how difficult math used to be without computers. When Virgil stood abruptly, he couldn't hide his surprise. Grace had always complained about struggling with math, so when had she gotten this good? Kenza realized he might have slipped up. Scrambling, he made up a story. He claimed it was pure luck. He described visiting a library where a book conveniently fell open to a page about dividing by 9. Supposedly, he just remembered it. When the prince echoed Grace's lucky break, Kenza knew for certain he'd been caught, but quickly shifted the spotlight onto Anna, praising her for her dedication to such monotonous calculations. Virgil wasn't fooled though. He remembered Grace's stubborn streak and figured she must have secretly trained for hours to overcome her weakness in math. And not only that, she even chose to share the praise with a fellow student. That humility paired with talent. Virgil felt his admiration soar. And this woman is my future queen, he thought, dazzled by her potential. His heart skipped 3 consecutive beats. Meanwhile, while the student council always made waves, there was one particular debate that always surfaced: who was the strongest among them? August, known as a guardian, was favored for his mastery of martial arts, enhanced further by magical energy. Then there was Richard, a sword master, trained in legendary techniques passed down through generations. The two faced off in a breathtaking duel that surpassed Kenza's expectations. Given that this was a world modeled after an Odom game, he didn't think the combat would be so intense. The match ended in a tie, until a bug landed squarely on Augusti's back. He asked Richard to help, but Richard flatly refused, claiming bugs drove him crazy. That's when Kenza stepped in and removed it, shocked to find it was none other than a rare Miyama stag beetle. The king of creepy crawlies every bug-loving kid admired. Its powerful jaws and uniquely shaped head were nothing short of amazing. Kenza thought it looked awesome. August expressed his thanks and urged Grace to just crush it. But Kenza would never stoop to something so cruel and absurd. He found it odd that the boys around here didn't seem to grasp how incredible bugs were. Then again, he recalled that bug collecting wasn't really a thing outside Japan. He summoned a magic circle and wrote the word, "Return," to send the beetle safely back to the woods. He then explained that all living beings are part of nature's masterpiece, and that needlessly killing even a bug was disgraceful for someone of noble lineage. That heartfelt sentiment made August's chest flutter, and he and Anna sparkled on the spot. Was this love? He wondered, sparking 3 more times. Later on, Richard brought the girls to see the Academy's vault, which housed priceless weapons donated by prominent alumni. Maintaining them properly was a key responsibility of the student council. One such artifact was the holy axe, Gargantua. Richard went on a long-winded explanation about its features, tossing in a warning: misuse it, and you'll have an axe ident. Next, he gushed over an enchanted shield named Archelon, claiming that anyone who attacked might find themselves between a block and a hard place. Yes, those puns were very much on purpose. Virgil leaned over and whispered to the girls that Richard stayed quiet most of the time because he couldn't stop cracking dad jokes, and nearly everyone discouraged him from speaking in public. Richard launched into yet another pun, this time about armor, then swords, but Kenza fired back with a multi-layered pun of his own, saying a dual sword-wielding council member could give students a real education. Richard was stunned. To him, Grace was clearly the reigning queen of puns. He graciously accepted defeat, and soon, word spread through the school like wildfire. Grace had become the undisputed star of the student council. In a letter home, Anna wrote to her parents, updating them about her first month in the academy dorms. She said she was doing well and spoke highly of the student council, especially Lady Grace, who she viewed as an academic and social role model. Among the first-year members were 2 notable young men. First was Prince Lucas Vierge, the second prince, known for his friendliness and ever-present smile. Then there was Lambert Balance, a brilliant mind with top-tier grades. However, he seemed unusually strict with her. At one point, even questioning why she hadn't finished her calculations when he had already wrapped his up. He spoke in a patronizing tone, commenting on how odd it was that someone who aced the entrance exam could be lagging behind now. He questioned how she managed to outperform him if she was this slow. Accusing her of slacking, he continued, until Kenza calmly stepped in to break the tension. Since Lambert had already completed his own tally, Kenza redirected him to help with the council's total rather than scolding Anna any further. Once he walked away, Anna exhaled in frustration, still puzzled about why Lambert seemed to despise her. But Lucas disagreed, saying he doubted Bert actually disliked her. She seemed confused, prompting Lucas to clarify. Lambert was currently the adopted heir to the prestigious Balance family, but he was born the 3rd son of a destitute noble family in the countryside. That made him practically a commoner. Yet, thanks to his intelligence and early magical talent, he earned a place at the academy. Anna and Lambert had similar pasts. That's why Kenza figured Lambert probably saw her as a rival. He didn't want to be bested. Anna misunderstood, assuming that rivalry meant dislike. But Kenza gently corrected her, saying that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. Her assumption that he hated her proved he was clearly paying her a lot of attention. In Kenza's view, Lambert's romantic path was already locked in. His love flag was triggered. Anna tilted her head at the term flag, baffled by Lady Grace's odd choice of words. Grace had more pressing matters though, first scolding Prince Lucas for crafting paper airplanes out of important paperwork inside the council room. The following day, Thanks to some number crunching using an abacus, Anna breezed through her council tasks. Grace pointed out she'd outpaced Bert for once, and reminded her that it was only possible because she'd taught Anna how to use the device. Bert then challenged Grace's judgment, saying they weren't working under equal conditions. But Kenza softly noted that there was no contest. Tabulating was about keeping the council running smoothly. He then pulled out another abacus he just so happened to have on him and handed it to Lambert, who curiously accepted. Kenza knew he couldn't resist. Then, he suggested Anna be the one to show Lambert how it worked. This was all part of a scheme he and Anna cooked up the day before. Since Sunder types like Bert were usually easy to sway, Anna was eager to prove her worth to the council and academy, and true to the trope, Bert stammered, blushed, and agreed, reluctantly, that he'd allow her to teach him as if it was her privilege. Anna was overjoyed. As she got started, Kenza casually handed yet another abacus to Lucas. She hoped Lucas would pick it up too. Giving Bert someone to rival might help him stay motivated. While Bert was easy to handle, Lucas was more of a mystery, making his path the trickiest. Mischievous types were harder to read, and Kenza wondered if his love flag with Anna had been triggered too. But then again, was it even right for a villainess to be helping others fall in love? Too late to back out now. He had to chastise Lucas again, this time for treating the abacus like a guitar. A full month had gone by since Kenza and Anna began their magical studies at the Royal Academy. With the new term came a new focus. Anna was now summoning a beast, and her creature of choice was a Pegasus. The crowd wasn't exactly thrilled. Pegasi were seen as fairly typical, nothing rare or flashy. But Grenat noted its wind affinity, which delighted Anna. Kenza found it perfectly fitting for the heroine's role. And now, after all this emphasis on romance in Magical Academy, Love and Beast, we finally returned to the beast part. A flashback revealed Hinako had explained early on that beasts worked like familiars, serving their masters. In the game, every protagonist received a beast egg upon arrival at the academy, which hatched a month later. Each beast had its own elemental type, expanding the user's magic capabilities. Most players saw this as the real start of the magic system. The kind of beast the protagonist received also greatly influenced the story path that followed. As Grace, Kenza congratulated Anna, asking whether she'd be pursuing wind magic now. A few students debated among themselves. Wasn't wind magic best paired with earth, or maybe water, or was it fire? Their confusion led naturally into a world-building tutorial on how the elements interacted. Kenza played along and asked their instructor to briefly go over the elemental matchups again, earning himself a little extra affection from Anna. So, 4 basic elements: fire, water, wind, and earth. Fire and water oppose each other, same with earth and wind. Wind backs fire, fire boosts earth aids water, and water enhances wind. Grenat stressed how vital support magic was. Fire could handle water-based foes well enough, but that wasn't enough for stronger monsters. With wind support, fire became powerful enough to take them down. Kenza mused to himself about how, in the games he played before, he'd just re-roll until he got the beast he wanted. He jokingly asked Anna if she'd re-roll, given the chance. Her response was no, which reminded Kenza sweetly of his daughter. And just then, Prince Virgile and August made their dramatic entrance. They had come to see their fellow council members perform their beast summons, and naturally, both decided to show off their own. Prince Virgile's companion was a griffin with a wind attribute, while Augusti's partner was a mighty Garuda imbued with fire. Both creatures were rare and radiated immense mana. The prince praised Anna's humble yet genuine beast, saying it perfectly reflected her character and would be her ideal partner. August added that a beast's true strength depended on how much its master nurtured its potential. Kenza couldn't help but see this as both men showing growing fondness toward Anna. Standing in his own summoning circle, Kenza recalled the moment a month earlier when he first stood before Grenat with his egg. These eggs matured by absorbing mana from their masters. Kenza hadn't taken it too seriously. After all, the heroine's beast had already hatched, and he doubted anyone cared about what sort of creature the villainess would summon. What he didn't realize was that August secretly hoped Grace's beast would be fire-aligned. Virgil wished for a wind-aligned partner, and even Anna quietly wanted Grace's beast to share her wind affinity. Clearly, there was more interest than he expected. When light poured from Kenza's egg, he was reminded of Hinako's words about never rerolling for beasts. She was never a min-maxing, try-hard type. She believed it felt wrong to act like a creature was never born just to get a better one. In that moment, Kenza completely understood. Especially since this world wasn't a game, it couldn't simply be reset. He vowed to accept whatever came out. but he was not prepared for what did emerge: two tiny figures, one resembling Kenza and the other Grace, both sound asleep. The onlookers were stunned. Then he heard a girl's uncertain voice say, "Huff, fuse them." "How?" "With my hands." He recognized it immediately. It was his daughter's voice. Suddenly, a screen materialized in front of him. Two hands reached out from it, gently pressing the mini Kenza and Grace together, merging them into a small crimson dragon. Though the event was bizarre, everyone quickly quieted down to allow Grenat to complete the appraisal. To the teacher's shock, the creature turned out to be an ancient dragon, a legendary beast. What's more, it possessed both fire and water attributes. Prince Virgil was incredulous. It was common knowledge that no beast could hold more than one element, especially two that directly contradicted each other. Anna, however, just saw it as another display of Grace's extraordinary nature. Meanwhile, we cut to Hanako, 20 years old, born to parents who were both hardcore otaku. She was practically an otaku by inheritance. Recently, during a challenge run of Magical Academy Love and Beast, she received a distressing call from her mother. Her father had been in an accident. The doctor explained that while Kenza had suffered a blow to the head, scans revealed no brain damage or external injuries. Strangely, he remained unconscious, as if locked in a dreamlike state. The hospital planned further tests to figure out what was happening. Hinako tried to cheer her mother up by focusing on the positives. She joked that one day, her dad would probably leap out of bed shouting, "You fool, Jotaro. I've been revived because of you." Her mother chuckled and played along, replying, "Yar yer. Seems like you're the real one." But beneath the humor, Hinako genuinely believed her father would recover. Hearing that the child he saved was safe made her think of him as a true hero, just like the tokusatsu characters he admired. To her, there was no way he wouldn't wake up. When Hinako returned home, she found the TV already on, displaying her favorite game. Strangely, her controller wouldn't advance the game as usual, and the remote wouldn't even turn off the screen. Looking closely, she noticed something odd during the scene where Anna argued with Grace. Grace was saying how wise and caring the heroine's parents must be. Then she spotted the name tag for Grace, which now displayed Kenzaburo in parentheses. She froze in disbelief. That night, she told her mother everything, sounding like someone who had lost her mind, as she declared that her father's consciousness was trapped inside the game. Her mother didn't hesitate to believe her. After all, Mitsuko's generation had grown up reading the never-ending story in middle school and had consumed countless isekai tales since then. She wasn't about to let her daughter question her otaku expertise. She proudly listed off classics she'd watched: Crest of the Royal Family, Machine Hero Wataru, NG Night Lamune and 40. Honestly, I have no clue about these references. She even mentioned Ray Earth, Fushigi Yugi, and the 12 Kingdoms, rattling on like a true veteran otaku. Hinako had to stop her before she dove into Mecha Isekai, OVA Isekai, and the Chronicles of Narnia. Regaining focus, Hinako explained what she had observed. The usual choice prompts weren't appearing, though she could still push the story forward by pressing the A button and using the dialogue log to review earlier scenes. Together, they went over the moments when Grace praised the chef with her elegant cheat skill, performed the divide by 9 trick, and made that ridiculous pun about giving a proper education. That was more than enough proof. It had to be Kenza. They both concluded that the only way to bring him back was to finish the game. The following morning, Mitsuko woke to find Hinako still playing, having powered through the entire night. She pointed out how time moved differently between their world and the game. While she had stayed up just one night, an entire month had already passed in Love and Beast. Then, without warning, a notification popped up asking her to assist with Kenza's beast summoning. This was her first chance to actually intervene in the story. Hanako was baffled, since beast summoning was supposed to rely entirely on RNG with no outside interference. Still, there was only one clear choice: they had to help. That was when the mini versions of Kenza and Grace appeared, and the game prompted them to fuse the two by combining their mana. Hinako had to physically reach into the game, and to her shock, it turned out the game meant it quite literally. Meanwhile, the principal admired Grace's dragon, though it wasn't his first encounter with such a creature. He had even seen beasts that possessed dual elements before. Kenza assumed that the unusual summoning ritual must have played a part in this phenomenon. The principal then asked Grace to test the dragon's spellcasting. Kenza commanded a fire attack, and Orion unleashed a powerful blast that instantly earned Anna's praise. However, when he ordered the dragon to cast a water spell, Orion just tilted its head in confusion. The principal found the name Grace had chosen for the dragon rather charming. but she clarified that it wasn't her own idea. The name had simply appeared on the familiar stat screen. Interestingly, this same interface allowed Kenza to change the dragon's elemental attributes, a feature invisible to everyone else. By toggling its element, Orion's scales shifted from crimson to bright azure, and upon casting the shoot spell, it unleashed a ferocious water jet. Although switching forms worked seamlessly, Kenza realized he had no method for blending both elements into a single attack. Once the demonstration ended, the principal questioned why Grace's familiar was the only one with two opposing elements. To everyone's shock, Grace openly explained that she felt as though another soul had been born within her, one that merged with her original self. She believed this fusion of souls had brought Orion into existence. Auguste found her claim hard to believe, but Virgil thought it made sense, pointing to her recent shift in personality. The principal, however, assumed she was simply maturing and stepping into a new version of herself. He recalled how her parents had mentioned her strong sense of duty, so he concluded that her drive to prove herself at the academy must have sparked this new persona. Honestly, I think he was completely off the mark. Regardless, he reminded her of an important responsibility. At the end of each semester, the academy holds an event called the Magic Exhibition, where only the top student council members showcase their abilities. He insisted that Grace should participate and display Orion's power. Grace wasn't thrilled by the idea, but Anna was ecstatic. With no other choice, Kenzo accepted, and the other council members eagerly offered their support. Jumping back to the moment after the summoning, Hinako and her mother discussed what had happened. Her mother was curious about the tiny Grace and Kenza figures, which made Hinako recall the miniature Grace from the character introduction screen. Observing Orion's combined powers, her mother concluded this had to be one of those cheat skills that always appear in isekai stories. When prompted to name the dragon, Hinako chose Orion, inspired by a small dinosaur character from her favorite childhood anime, one she had often watched with her father. She hoped he'd pick up on the connection. Unfortunately, he didn't, simply assuming the developers of Magical Academy were also fans of that anime. Later, when Orion needed to switch to its water attribute, Hinako had to manually disable autoplay and make the adjustment herself. This meant her father needed her input at crucial moments, or else he'd be stuck in the game. Hinako doubted whether she could actually see the story through to the end. That's when her mother reminded her that they had raised her well, and with that, Hinako felt a renewed surge of confidence. Empowered by the strength of her otaku bloodline, the scene shifted to Grace explaining everything to the principal and her friends. Inside, Kenza debated whether this was the perfect time to reveal the truth, that he was inhabiting Grace's body. Hinako grew uneasy, remembering a particular branch in Virgil's route where Grace becomes possessed by a demon and ultimately battles Anna. She feared that if her father confessed, they might mistake it for some kind of demonic possession. However, once the elegant cheat skill activated during his explanation, it muddied the waters enough that his words sounded vague and mysterious. Surprisingly, everyone misunderstood the situation, but in a positive way. This moment became the spark that set the stage for the upcoming magical exhibition. While the event itself was exciting, Hinako knew this was supposed to be the point where Anna and her love interest grew closer. Yet, things weren't heading in that direction at all. Meanwhile, in the school library, Francette, from the drama club, was practically glowing with excitement over the heartfelt stories she had been reading. She thought they would make excellent inspiration for the club's next big performance. For her, the library was pure paradise. She even wished she could live there forever. She kind of reminded me of another bookworm character, but we'll save that reference for another video. When she saw Grace and Anna approaching, Francette immediately launched into a flustered, starstruck frenzy. To her, Grace Auvergne was nothing short of breathtaking, and standing beside her was Anna, the Academy's very first student of peasant descent who earned her place through exceptional scores, the valedictorian of all valedictorians. Francette became so overwhelmed by their bond, which defied social class, that she literally burst into a nosebleed. Grace's reason for being in the library was to research advanced knowledge on magic and beasts. Kenza, in particular, was desperate for answers about Orion, how the creature could wield both fire and water attributes, the mysterious floating hands he had seen during the ritual, and the strange voice he had heard. It was then that Kenza spotted Prince Virgil spying on them from above. Soon after, PR, the student council secretary and loyal attendant to the prince, came rushing toward them. Kenza embarrassingly blanked on Pierre's name until Anna mentioned it first. Pierre explained that he was searching for the prince, Though he was an excellent attendant who handled Virgil's schedule with flawless precision, his overly serious and rigid personality often pushed the prince to his limits, forcing him to hide just to get some peace. The old Grace would have scolded Pierre harshly for this kind of thing, blaming him for every slip-up. It was just part of the burden of serving royalty. Pierre bowed and apologized, vowing that he would not lose track of Virgil again. But instead of criticizing Pierre, Grace encouraged him to shift his perspective. If Virgil was actively avoiding him, then he should take that as a rare chance to rest, free from the prince's constant demands. Kenza reminded him that people weren't built to work tirelessly every single moment. The more exhausted a person becomes, the worse their performance gets. Regular breaks were essential to maintain one's peak abilities. Pierre was stunned by this refreshing, generous outlook. Anna, on the other hand, found Grace's reasoning brilliant. Grace praised Pierre's dedication, which left him deeply honored, though he still carried his usual stiff demeanor. Kenza then inquired about study materials for magical beasts, but Pierre's knowledge on the topic turned out to be limited. At the very least, the girls asked him to show them his beast, Pollux, a gargoyle with a water attribute. Anna quickly noted that, with Virgil's beast wielding wind magic, Pierre's water attribute must make him the ideal support. Pierre proudly confirmed that he had indeed served as Virgil's support during last year's magic exhibition. He then assured Grace that she could count on his help anytime, especially since she would one day marry Virgil. However, Kenza wasn't so sure of that, as nothing was set in stone until the wedding took place. Virgil didn't take this comment lightly. He leapt down from the second floor, demanding to know what his fiancée meant by that statement. Unfortunately for him, Pierre had been desperately searching for him all this time, and this little stunt got him caught red-handed. Anna wondered how the prince had been eavesdropping, so Virgil explained it was thanks to his wind magic. By manipulating air currents, he could carry sound from a distance. Kenza immediately took the opportunity to push Anna toward Virgil, suggesting that the prince should teach her everything about wind magic. He was trying to nudge Anna further down Virgil's route by increasing their closeness. The prince gladly agreed, but Anna tried to shyly refuse. Seeing this, Kenza decided to lean into his villainous role. He snapped at her, "Oh please, get off your high horse. This training isn't for your sake. I'm simply preparing for the magical exhibition, and I won't tolerate an assistant who can only perform second-rate magic." Ironically, his tough tone had the opposite effect. Anna lit up with joy and affection, thrilled that Grace had chosen her as her support. Everyone applauded Grace's kind words, which left Kenza baffled as to why things always turned out this way. Meanwhile, August and Richard kicked off a beast battle, fire versus water, blow after blow. Hanako and her mother were on the edge of their seats, amazed at the stunning choreography of the fight scenes. The spectacle was far beyond what you'd expect from a simple otome game. The boys had staged this mock battle purely to give Grace a glimpse of what a magic exhibition was like. Hanako couldn't help but admire her dad. Even at 52, he set aside his pride and asked kids younger than him for pointers. Mitsuko commented that Kenza had always been young at heart. She recalled him often saying, "Age doesn't matter. Anyone with skill is worth learning from." He had always been inspired by talented artists who made a name for themselves while still in high school. Hanako began to wonder if that very open-minded personality of his was what led his consciousness into this game world in the first place. Anna thanked the boys for their spectacular demonstration, noting how their opposing elements made their battles all the more dazzling. Richard, never missing a chance for a pun, grinned and told the girls to keep it quiet, because their matches were sec-wet in fire-mation. Kenza, watching their dynamic, observed that August excelled in defense while Richard thrived in offense, making them a perfectly balanced pair. The boys were proud of this fact, and Kenza could see why. They were both destined to become commanders in the royal knighthood. One would stand as the shield and the other as the sword, roles they had been diligently training for since childhood. Noticing how much Anna admired them, Kenza briefly entertained the thought of keeping both their routes open for her to pursue. But their attention soon shifted when Anna pointed out damage along the cliffside from their exhibition. Embedded in the stone were massive bones, their jagged shapes protruding like the remnants of some ancient creature. Kenza instantly recognized them as dinosaur bones, but August looked utterly puzzled. He had no idea what a dinosaur was. In this world, such remains were known as lost bones, and legend claimed they were born from failed experiments meant to create new monsters. August, however, wasn't particularly impressed by them. His explanation oddly aligned with Kenza's own knowledge of Earth, where people once believed fossilized bones were cursed creations of the gods. It seemed the scholars of this Otome world had reached a similar conclusion. To test the cliff structure, August encouraged Anna to try hitting it with her magic, summoning Sirius. Anna unleashed a powerful gust of wind that carved through the rock with startling force. The boys, though impressed, couldn't hide their disappointment. Her skill, as a mere newcomer, highlighted how little they themselves had improved since last year. Their flashy water versus fire clashes were entertaining but lacked real synergy, barely scratching the surface of their beasts' true potential. Kenza quickly recognized the flaw. Auguste's defensive use of fire magic was a waste of raw power, and Richard's icicle projectiles didn't complement his swordsmanship in the slightest. He began to wonder if there was a way to create a deeper harmony between the sorcerer and their beast. Suddenly, the cliff erupted. A skeletal monster clawed its way out of the stone, a dragon skeleton. With lightning-fast reflexes, Auguste blocked the creature's first strike, calling out its name. The realization hit Kenza like a shockwave. These bones weren't just fossils. They were living monsters, dormant until disturbed. Kenza concluded that Anna's intense magic must have been what woke it up. Her raw mana was so strong that it acted as a beacon, attracting nearby monsters. The skeletal dragon lunged again, forcing Auguste to block its attack with a wall of fire. The boys shouted for the girls to retreat to the academy for backup. They were determined to hold off the monster themselves. Kenza hesitated. He and Anna had never received proper combat training. There was a real chance they'd only get in the way. But as they turned to flee, Anna stopped in her tracks. The boys weren't faring well. Their attacks lacked cohesion, and the dragon skeleton's relentless strikes pushed them to their limits. Thinking fast, Kenza analyzed their magic circles. If their individual strengths could be enhanced, they might stand a chance. Channeling Grace's magic, he drew the inscription for Sword on Richard's circle and Shield on Auguste's. In an instant, their beast transformed. Richard's beast merged into a blade of icy brilliance, while Auguste's fire condensed into a blazing, impenetrable shield. The two boys were stunned. They hadn't even known their beasts were capable of this kind of transformation. With their newfound weapons, Auguste launched a searing wall of flame that staggered the skeletal monster, and Richard finished the fight with a devastating icy slash, shattering the creature into a cascade of bones. Breathing heavily, the boys turned to Grace with gratitude. But Kenza, maintaining Grace's composed demeanor, brushed it off as mere luck. "I just happened to know the right spell at the right time," he said casually, though inside he knew he'd just saved the day. He never expected them to kneel before him and pledge absolute loyalty. That wasn't what he wanted at all, and he couldn't help but question the constant sparkling light that appeared. Hanako explained that it signified a boost in the intimacy meter. So, he was right all along. Kenza wished they would direct their affections toward Anna instead. The Royal Magic Academy's courtyard was protected by a barrier that stopped spells from escaping, making it the perfect area for students to train their magic. Here, Kenza and Anna summoned Orion and Sirius, merging their powers to create a blazing tornado. Grennet noted how Anna's wind magic enhanced Grace's fire. Both she and the principal were eager to witness next week's magic exhibition. After the day's practice, Kenza became preoccupied with Orion's strange behavior. The dragon seemed to be trying to signal something repeatedly. Hanako grew frustrated, wishing she could send a message to her father to let him know she was watching. Since she could see everything happening inside the world of Un-B, she felt she was meant to help him clear the game. Unfortunately, all she could currently do was toggle Orion's fire and water attributes. Then the background music shifted, and 3 sprites approached her father, demanding his attention. Hanako realized they were the arrogant NPCs from Grace's entourage in the original version of the game. They scolded Grace for relying on a lowborn like Anna for such an important position. Rumors were spreading rapidly, threatening not just Grace's reputation, but potentially tarnishing the entire academy, even disgracing the Duke's family name. Hinako noticed the snob's character art suddenly looked sharper. Was the resolution improving as her father grew closer to the characters? One of them accused Anna Dole of being a fraud who secretly mocked Grace, claiming her friendship was just a ploy to exploit noble privileges. She even bragged about manipulating Grace to her commoner friends. These lies enraged Hinako. She slammed a button on her controller, causing Orion to spit out a flame that startled the trio. Was that her doing, or just chance? After getting their names, Kenza flipped the script, warning them that their actions reflected on their own noble families. He hinted that people might think they used rumors and intimidation as a tool to mislead others. The three bullies immediately shrank back in fear as Kenza walked away. Even Hanako was impressed by how calm and sharp her father was, now jotting down their names on his fan. Later, in the student council room, Lucas and Bert became curious about Grace's newly acquired magic wand. Kenza then revealed his fan cleverly concealed a wand inside. He disliked the hassle of carrying both a fan and a wand, so he had the family's craftsman merge the two into one. Lucas wanted the same, but Bert teased him, saying a fan would look odd on a guy. Anna chimed in with creative alternatives, suggesting the wand could be hidden in a briefcase or the spine of a book, where opening it would reveal a magic circle inscribed inside. Bert was instantly fascinated, indulging his middle school fantasy of wielding magic through a spellbook. Exactly what the others wanted to lure him with. Bert eagerly asked Grace to contact her family's craftsman for him, and Kenza had no objections. Lucas then pointed out how impressive it was for Anna and Grace to be chosen for the magic exhibition during their first semester as first years. Even Auguste and Richard had only been selected in their third semester. While Kenza admitted that having a special beast was just luck, his decision to choose Anna as his partner was entirely intentional. Bert, brimming with envy, declared that if Anna didn't perform well, he'd claim her spot next time. Kenza was delighted to see such young rivals pushing each other with respect. Lucas then shifted from his usual carefree tone to warn Grace that Anna might face hardships ahead. The academy was steeped in aristocratic values, and not every student shared their understanding or kindness. Kenza already sensed this, recalling the three arrogant girls who mocked Anna and demanded she quit being Grace's assistant. They even claimed Grace had called Anna a foul-smelling peasant and a bothersome nuisance who didn't know her place. Their insults dragged on endlessly. In response, Anna calmly mentioned that her family owned a thriving bakery with strong connections throughout town. She recalled her family's advice: stay wary of those who claim others are slandering you. Such people will inevitably speak ill of you as well. Kenza was deeply impressed. He could see Anna was raised by loving parents who instilled strong values, and as a father himself, he admired them greatly. Determined, Anna told the trio to come along so they could confront Grace directly and hear her true feelings. The snobs panicked, warning Anna that she could be expelled or humiliated publicly. But Anna didn't care. No matter what, she would still treasure her friendship with Grace. Her respect and gratitude for her wouldn't waver. Kenza and Hinako were both in tears at Anna's sincerity. Kenza suddenly stepped in, making the bullies freeze in fear. He reminded them of his earlier warning, but then he apologized, saying he had been too indirect before and that this misunderstanding was his fault. Hanako realized her father was deliberately taking the blame to prevent any future trouble. His refined social skills were shining through. He made it clear that to him, a student's social background didn't matter. Everyone was here to learn equally. They all shared the same wavelength, meant to uplift one another. The women admired Kenza's generous heart. He encouraged unity among them as classmates, and they wholeheartedly agreed. At the Auburn estate, maintaining the grand home and its sprawling grounds takes a lot of effort. So many servants live and work on the land. The man overseeing them all is Duke Leopold Auburn. Inside his residence, he was relieved to see his daughter in good health. He'd been deeply anxious ever since hearing she'd fallen off her horse last month and had barely been able to rest. Kenza knew him both as Grace's father and the kingdom's finance minister. His work often kept him away, and this visit marked his first return in 2 months. He embodied everything expected of someone from the highest ranks of society, yet surprisingly, he'd only just turned 45, making him younger than Kenza, a fact that left Kenza slightly disheartened. Leopold handed his daughter a present, a beautifully crafted rocking horse he'd discovered in a woodworking town, letting out a big laugh over how much joy the find had brought him. Kenza, digging through Grace's childhood recollections, recalled that she adored rocking horses as a toddler, suggesting Leopold picked the gift unaware of how much she'd grown since then. If the real Grace had witnessed this, she probably would have exploded. She might have exclaimed, "Do you seriously see me as a baby who still babbles goo goo ga father?" Still, Kenza, playing the role of Grace, responded graciously, thanking him for the thoughtful memory. It gave her an idea too. She'd been stumped on what to gift her young cousin Francois, who'd be turning 5 next month. Grace even saved her father from looking ridiculous, telling the staff there's no way a 15-year-old girl like her was the intended recipient of the child's toy. The servants applauded Leopold's clever solution for helping Grace pick out a gift for her cousin, unaware of the misunderstanding. and he simply went along with their interpretation. Thanks to this, Grace's reputation among the staff soared. As Kenza strolled the estate with Josette, she reflected on how Duke Leopold missed the mark as a parent, struggling to understand his daughter's shifting passions over the years. They were on their way to thank Maester Walls with some treats, since Grace had recently assigned him another task. Suddenly, they heard loud voices and spotted the Duke and Walls in the middle of an intense top-spinning match. Kenza was caught off guard that such toys even existed in this world. But what shocked him more was seeing Grace's dignified father acting so playfully. Grace herself had no recollection of anything like this. It was hard to picture a nobleman enjoying a street game usually played by common kids. Still, it seemed like the two men were longtime rivals in such games. Leopold realized he'd really dropped the ball with that gift. But he appreciated how Grace had stepped in to smooth things over and spare him from embarrassment. He found the realization hard to stomach. Deep down, he believed he wasn't cut out for the title of Duke. After all, he was only the second-born son of a country noble family. Kenza sifted through Grace's recollections, recalling that it was Grace's mother, Jacqueline, who hailed from the noble Auvergne lineage. In contrast, Leopold had earned admiration for his brilliance and was welcomed into the family by marrying in. Despite climbing the ranks to become the Minister of Finance, he might have still battled feelings of inadequacy. Though Kenza understood that as a man, he still believed it didn't excuse anything. That's when Grace stepped forward, startling Leopold into retreat. But instead of anger, she teased him for keeping all the fun activities to himself. She wanted to join in too. She even admitted she'd been spending time with the Maester regularly and asked her father not to mention it to her mother. While the two enjoyed a friendly match with spinning tops, Grace opened up, saying she didn't mind that her father came from humble beginnings. What mattered was that he honored both his duties and family with unwavering devotion, making him the finest father anyone could ask for. Then, after knocking out his top, Leopold questioned her impressive skill. Kenza brushed it off as beginner's luck. Maybe he'd gotten too excited and forgot to hold back. The scene then shifted to Anna waking up calmly. She wrestled with her skirt, clearly in a rush. It was the day of their hands-on magic exams. Though she made it on time, she still apologized to Grace for being late. Kenza spotted her poorly tied ribbon and helped adjust it. Watching this, Hinako marveled at how her father's, Mademoiselle Flair, had grown sharper than ever. While Elegant Cheat added polish to his performance, it was Kenza's flexibility that really stood out. Her mother joked that even if he regained his body, traces of that Mademoiselle style would remain. As the mother and daughter chatted, they walked toward a major occasion, the final exam for the first semester. Regular students had to perform magic for an examiner, but top-tier students had to demonstrate their prowess in front of distinguished spectators. Auguste and Richard were already wowing the crowd, showing off their new beast transformations in a thrilling performance. Watching from above, Leopold admitted he'd never seen beasts turned into weapons before. The principal soon arrived, noting that Grace was the one responsible for that breakthrough. Grace and Anna then stepped into the spotlight. Grace politely asked her seniors to rise so as not to mislead the audience, though Auguste and Richard were honoring the knight's code with their respectful kneeling. Leopold was stunned to hear his daughter had trained the boys in those advanced techniques. The principal remarked that Grace had a rare gift. She not only nurtured others' potential, but even supported a commoner like Anna. When Professor Grenat summoned 3 Gignals, the exhibition was set to begin. Virgil found it odd that Grenat had chosen such complex creatures. Pierre commented that new students usually face stationary targets on their first attempt. Having multiple fast-moving enemies felt like an unfair challenge, calling on Orion to unleash a fireball, and with Anna enhancing it using her wind magic, the two managed to create a blazing tornado that completely consumed their 3 enemies in one go. But Grenat wasn't finished yet. He fused all 3 beasts into a single creature. When Kenza fired a test shot of fire magic, it did nothing. That's when he realized the creature's element had changed from water to earth, due to its scorched flesh. So, Kenza quickly ordered Orion to shift to water-based attacks. Hanako complied, and Kenza outlined the strategy to Anna, urging her to lead this time. He reminded her that wind magic is especially potent against earth when backed by water. Anna, nervous, hesitated. Hanako shared her concern. Anna's stats had been low from the start, and with her HP and MP running low, casting might be impossible. But Kenza cheered her on with trust and belief. Anna took it to heart and fired off a cyclone. Kenza followed up with a frost spell from Orion, and the combo created a massive snowstorm. Once their target was frozen solid, the two launched a final coordinated blow, ending the fight in style. The crowd erupted in applause. Not long after, the student council came over to applaud their victory. Leopold joined in too, introducing himself to the remarkable commoner girl everyone had been talking about. Anna grew flustered, especially as Grace added her compliments. Modestly, Anna credited Grace for her spell strength. Then, out of nowhere, she blurted out that she'd started gaining weight, leaving both father and daughter visibly confused. Hinako suddenly remembered a scene like this from the game. She located an old quest log titled, "A Determination to Diet." It flashed back to Grace commenting on Anna's nearly empty plate. Turns out, the delicious food had made Anna go wild on portions, and it had taken a toll on her waistline, to the point where she struggled to squeeze into her uniform. Back in the day, Kenzo would have instinctively told his daughter that dieting too young could lead to weak bones, or insisted girls looked healthier with a little weight. But having lived in Grace's body for a month, he now understood things differently. Gently, he warned Anna not to risk her health over losing a few pounds. Then he admitted he felt a little sad, since he loved seeing the joy on her face when she ate. That came from his fatherly instinct of spoiling kids with food. Seeing Grace look so devastated moved Anna. She took another helping, thinking to herself, "Eat when you can." Just like commoners do, she decided to eat to her heart's content and simply burn it off later. That's when she began jogging twice a day, squeezing in magical and combat training with her upperclassmen between sessions. It paid off. Her stamina shot up. In fact, she'd built so much muscle. Her skirt felt snug that morning. Kenzo admired her dedication. Pierre, however, credited Grace for helping Anna push herself forward without scolding or pressure. Her father beamed with pride. Virgil believed Grace was destined to lead the kingdom to greatness. Auguste thought she was the definition of cool. Richard saw her as an angel. At that moment, Kenzo realized that this radiant affection from everyone was tied to rising affection meters. One morning, Anna and Bert found themselves in a lively magical duel. His earth spells clashed with her wind techniques, neutralizing each other perfectly. Just like they'd studied in class. Bert was especially thrilled to try out his new Magic 1 book hybrid, crafted by none other than Grace's family artisan. It exceeded all his expectations. He got so carried away talking about it that he ended up flustered, cheeks red, quickly collecting himself again. A week had gone by since the magic exhibition, and today, Lambert, Anna, and Prince Lucas were visiting the Auvergne estate. After getting a look at Grace's magical fan, Lambert expressed his desire for a similar enchanted item. So, 2 weeks prior, Grace contacted Meister Walls to craft him a wand embedded in a book. With Anna included in the visit, it was a great chance to strengthen their relationship. Grace remarked that despite Anna and Bert having opposite magical affinities, their teamwork was surprisingly smooth. Lucas agreed, suggesting their differing personalities actually balanced one another quite well. While enjoying tea and pastries, the group chatted about how Bert's wand book was customized based on the fundamentals of magic circles. Bert reminisced about growing up in a modest noble family far on the borderlands. Even though they didn't have much, his parents made sure he got a solid education. His elder brothers were gifted warriors, so they were given fine steeds and weapons. Since Bert showed a love for magic, his parents gave him that very book. He fondly remembered casting his first spell, making blossoms bloom on a withering tree. That moment sparked a realization in him. This book would help him flourish and create a life full of beauty and meaning. With fatherly warmth, Grace remarked that Bert's parents must be extremely proud. Anna agreed. But Bert insisted that Anna's parents had even more reason to be proud of her. And just like that, blush alert. Could it be love? Their backgrounds weren't too far apart either. Maybe the Lambert route was the most plausible path for Anna. She came from humble beginnings, and Lambert's family were minor nobles living on the outskirts. Even Duke Auvern's noble lineage came from the rural countryside. It seemed fairly common in this world for talented people of lower standing to climb the ranks. Maybe Anna could even rise all the way to queen, if she pursued Virgil's path. Kenza noticed Anna hadn't touched the desserts. Turns out she had never tasted anything this elegant before, and wasn't sure how to go about it. Wait a second, didn't her family run a bakery? Oh, so it was just the etiquette part she was unfamiliar with. Lucas gently steered the conversation toward summer plans. Anna shared that she intended to stay in the dorms as long as possible, only heading home when the school officially closed. Lucas called that a missed opportunity. He suggested a far better idea: Grace should invite Anna to spend the break at the Auvergne estate so she could experience aristocratic life firsthand. Anna hesitated, worried about being a burden. But Kenza pointed out that she still hadn't fully realized the responsibilities that came with her new place in the world. One day, she might rise to the top tiers of the kingdom's hierarchy, so it was vital for her to start by picking up basic etiquette and formal customs. Anna was stunned. She understood that the highest tier meant royalty, and since the crown prince was already betrothed to Grace, she figured Grace must be grooming her for a spot at court as a lady-in-waiting. Fired up by this mistaken assumption, Anna dove into her new role with full-throttle enthusiasm, eager to master the ways of the nobility. Meanwhile, Kenza found himself wandering through a strange, silent world. It was an empty void, unfamiliar and still. Orion suddenly appeared, addressing Kenza as his father and asking him to come along, using Hanako's voice. Kenza didn't find this strange. After all, he technically was the dragon's parent in a sense. Soon, he spotted Grace locked inside a cage but didn't know how to approach her. His first instinct was to break her out. But the moment he touched the bars, the cage lit up, and in a flash he awoke, clutching Anna's arm. Josette asked if her master had a nightmare. For Kenza, though, the memory was hazy and jumbled. That's when he noticed Anna dressed in a maid outfit. Turns out, today marked the start of her training with the estate's maids. Watching it unfold, Hanako was caught off guard by the bizarre dream. She didn't fully grasp what the image of caged Grace meant, but sensed it was a crucial clue, possibly hinting at a storyline unique to this world, diverging from the original LNB plot. Normally, during Anna's first summer break in the game, players only got two options: either stay at the dorms or return to her family home, and that choice influenced the development of her romance roots. The Auvergne estate had never been part of the original path. Still, being the central heroine, it shouldn't take Anna more than a few days to get a solid grasp of aristocratic decorum. She was determined to master every duty expected of Grace's personal attendants. Kenza figured it made sense. She'd probably have her own servants someday. But clearly, they weren't on the same wavelength at all. Since only Miss Mathilde had the skills to handle Grace's hairstyling, Anna and Josette were assigned to making the bed. Josette suddenly threw herself onto the mattress. Not for fun, but because she'd been taught by the head maid to always consider things from the master's point of view. Unless she lay down like Grace did, she couldn't properly assess the mattress's comfort or check for ceiling issues. Anna gave it a try next, but quickly got lost in the softness and the lingering scent of Grace's perfume. It felt like being wrapped in Grace's warm embrace. She snapped out of the daze, wiped away some drool, and got back to work. Watching all this unfold, Hinako couldn't help but grow anxious about how this route was progressing. Later, Anna sat down with Mathilde, eager to learn the secret behind Grace's signature hairstyle. Mathilde cheerfully revealed that it was all thanks to her native enchantment, a rare kind of innate magic unique to Beastkin. She had been using that power since birth, but it wasn't the kind of magic you could teach someone else. In fact, not all Beastkin were even born with magical abilities to begin with. Mathilde's unique enchantment allowed her to heat anything she touched with her hands. It was hot enough to boil water, though not enough to produce flames or fire spells. The power had its limitations, but she figured it could still be put to good use. Her first thought: ironing. She dreamed of smoothing out wrinkles from fabrics of all kinds. It turned out to be a hit. Fashionable ladies with elegant clothing quickly became her biggest clientele. Then, one day, the lady of the Auvergne household took her in. That marked the start of her career as the estate's full-time ironing maid. The job paid well enough for her to provide for all her younger siblings. She felt deeply grateful to the Duchess for changing her life. When Grace was still a baby, she'd often come watch Mathilde at work in the maid quarters, mesmerized by the way she ironed clothes. But something always lingered in Mathilde's heart. So one day, she asked if she could help with Grace's hair. She'd styled her siblings' hair before, using her magic to heat or cool individual strands, shaping them into curls or straight lines. Grace absolutely adored the result. From that day on, Mathilde became her go-to stylist. It even earned her a raise. Mathilde considered her enchantment a true blessing. Josette mentioned she'd never once seen Grace lose her temper at Mathilde, not even during her rougher days. But Mathilde always believed that any anger from Grace must have come from something worth being upset over. Later, the head maid Olive introduced herself as Anna's official tutor going forward. She began by giving some background on Grace's family. Her older brother, Lord Adrian, was currently studying overseas, while her mother, Duchess Jacqueline, was recovering at the family's countryside villa, which meant only Grace and her father were currently living at the estate. At this moment, The Auvergne household employed 300 servants. The estate sprawled across a vast piece of land, so the workforce was divided into indoor and outdoor divisions. The outdoor team included craftsmen and gardeners, while the indoor staff handled cleaning and laundry. Because the Duke's residence frequently hosted fundraising events to support public welfare, the interior had to be immaculate at all times. The cooking team was in charge of meals, not only for the family, but also for every servant, every day. Meanwhile, the administrative staff handled the estate's finances and business affairs. They also oversaw everything from wardrobe management to the family's cosmetic supplies. Outside, the landscaping crew maintained the gardens, and most of these workers lived on the property with their families. Then there was the ranching team, who tended to the horses and cattle, and the agriculture team managed the vineyard, producing wine. By the end of her first day, Anna was completely blown away by how much effort went into running the place. It wasn't just a household, it was more like a self-sustaining town. Even Inako hadn't seen this level of depth in any game guide before. Which made sense, considering developers rarely spent this much effort building lore around the family of the supposed villainess. Hinako had always harbored a quiet doubt that maybe this wasn't merely a video game world. What if it was a real place that just happened to mirror the game in uncanny detail? That suspicion grew stronger when Grace suddenly appeared before Anna and the maids wearing a maid uniform herself. Anna was completely stunned by the sight. When Anna blurted out, "You look great," Kenza misread it as her catching on to the subtle hint he had dropped earlier, that maybe he'd serve her someday. But in truth, Anna was just dazzled by how graceful and elegant Grace looked in anything she wore. Once again, their thoughts were completely misaligned. Switching to a more serious tone, Kenza asked Anna what she thought after observing how the servants worked. Did she feel that having over 300 people in service to a single household seemed excessive? Anna admitted it had shocked her at first. But she turned to Josette, who had been learning the ropes ever since arriving. In that time, Josette had picked up skills like housekeeping, literacy, and money management. That's when Anna realized this estate wasn't just a workplace offering fair wages, but also a school that taught young staff how to live. She went on to say that although the parties and garden events looked like high society indulgence, they actually served a bigger purpose. These gatherings were part of the Duke's responsibilities to foster public goodwill and enrich society. By hiring so many people, he was ensuring they had income to support their families. It wasn't just a mansion, it functioned like a miniature kingdom. Hearing this, Kenza took her hand and praised her insight. He told her bringing her here had been worth it, and he believed she was destined to one day rise among the noble class and use her influence for good. Anna felt similarly about improving herself, though once again, they had very different ideas about which one of them would end up queen. Although the Royal Magic Academy was on summer break, Grace and Anna continued attending special classes. This time, it was to access the underground vault, a sealed chamber filled with ancient magical artifacts and weapons passed down through the school's long history. The vault was protected by magical barriers, but those weakened considerably under the midsummer full moon. That's when the student council stepped in to inspect and maintain everything. Anna was a bit uneasy about the mission, but Grace reassured her that if they followed the senior students' lead, there'd be nothing to worry about. Once they met up with the council, Prince Lucas fiddled with a mysterious magical object that resembled a Rubik's Cube, solving it, which caused it to flash brightly. Instantly, all the boys vanished. Grace and Anna stood stunned, wondering where everyone went. Anna quickly pieced it together. The cube had trapped them inside. Kenza, recognizing it for what it was, realized Anna had never seen such a thing. Rubik's Cubes didn't exist in this world. At first, they considered asking a teacher for help, but before they could, they found themselves floating in a void. The vault door vanished behind them. Kenza suspected the device was powered by advanced earth magic that could bend space itself. Remembering how the colors had aligned earlier, he rotated one side of the cube, and suddenly, Virgil popped out. He explained that the strange cube was called the Labyrinth of Trials, a powerful artifact that had been sealed away in the academy for generations. The cube was usually secured beneath a barrier, but today of all days, that barrier was almost useless. Lucas, by chance, began turning the cube's sides until they aligned perfectly. This accidentally triggered the labyrinth's mechanism. Somewhere, there had to be a way to stop it. That solution suddenly appeared before them in a basket, inscribed with the words, "What am I? Look to the flood above and the flames below." Anna and the prince didn't grasp the meaning. That's when Kenza realized riddles didn't exist in this world. So, he introduced the concept of a brain teaser. Assuming this trial required magic to represent the solution, he summoned Orion, poured water into the basket, and lit a flame underneath it. Naturally, the answer was a bath. Virgil and Anna were stunned by Grace's brilliance, and Anna was convinced only Grace could have solved it, being the only one with both relevant magic attributes. This led Kenza to understand the trial was likely designed for two individuals to complete together. Oh no! This was meant to strengthen Anna's bond with one of her suitors. But instead, he was the one deepening his connection with her. As they entered the following chamber, Virgil was abruptly pulled back into the cube. Its sides were all scrambled again. Kenza figured this setup randomly brought in a different love interest per trial to increase their relationship score with Anna upon solving it. But the real issue was that he could barely solve more than a couple of cube sides himself. Just then, Lambert reappeared with flair, having observed everything from the other side. He thanked them and confirmed that all they had to do was complete each trial. When the next challenge started, Anna read aloud. It walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 at night. Recreate this being atop the stones. A famous riddle. Kenza immediately knew it referred to a human, but had no clue how to physically demonstrate it with the stones. He was going crazy, especially since the others were still confused about the solution. Wanting to support their budding romance, he offered a clue that helped Anna figure it out quickly. Bert then pointed out the stones and summoned his beast to fill the holes. The group just had to replicate the stances. 4 legs, 2, then 3. But when it seemed Grace would need to crawl for one phase, Anna tried to take her place. Bert stopped her and stepped in instead. Crawling in the morning, walking upright in the afternoon, and using a cane by night, they had completed the riddle. Before moving forward, Grace thanked Bert sincerely, calling him a perfect example of noble virtue. Bert responded modestly, asking to be chosen again for the next trial. Sadly, Grace had no plans to do so. Meanwhile, Hinako was stunned this was all part of a summer vacation event in the game. She had a sinking feeling it would end with everyone falling deeper for her father. She desperately needed to get him to solve the next puzzle fast, before things spiraled any further. As the next round began, Pierre quickly figured out the solution. Kenza recommended that Pierre use his water powers on the rings above, but it turned out Pierre had a deep fear of heights. So, Kenza stepped up and completed the challenge in his place. Pierre returned to the cube feeling defeated. For the next trial, which required solving 2 sides simultaneously, both Auguste and Richard emerged. Curious about what lay ahead, they noticed a miniature version of Lucas standing on a tiny porch. When he stepped inside, a riddle appeared. This hut is home to a traveler. What makes the traveler shed his cloak? Prove that it is not the cold winds, but the shining sun. Anna recognized the fable. It was their world's version of the north wind and the sun. Richard then began to beat a drum, as it was Southern tradition to send off travelers with a farewell tune. The tiny Lucas opened the door, but as soon as Richard started singing, Lucas retreated inside, clearly not enjoying it. Then Kenza gave it a try, drawing on his experience from a rhythm game he used to play. He performed Galaxy Express 999 by the band Godiego, a song from the late 70s that was unfamiliar to me, but actually sounded great. Lucas came out happily dancing, and just like that, the trial was cleared. The team had no idea how many more tests were ahead, but Grace led the way, and as their affection scores climbed, Hinako's deepest worries began to unfold. Once the boys returned to the cube, Kenza aimed to complete all 6 faces. Hinako wished she could contribute somehow. She recalled asking her father for help solving a Rubik's Cube back in grade school. He had admitted he couldn't solve all the sides, but had taught her a trick instead. Just then, Orion appeared, and to Hinako's surprise, she could now influence the game directly. She instructed Orion to take the cube apart, just as her father had once done. Together, they reassembled it so all colors matched. Kenza remembered doing the same thing years ago with his daughter. Although they pieced it together correctly, the cube rejected the shortcut. But Anna had glimpsed the core and insisted on solving it herself, and she succeeded. The cube returned to normal. Everyone cheered for Anna, and Kenza smiled. This win probably boosted all the guys' affection scores. But with everyone watching her, Anna thanked Grace for the helpful hints. The guys realized Grace could have easily solved all the puzzles but chose to leave clues so Anna could learn and grow. The affection boost Grace received from the entire building was the biggest Hinako had ever witnessed. Later, a strong gust sent a little girl's hat flying, and a group of children chased after it. Anna quickly brought it down with her whirlwind magic. The kids were amazed, impressed by the spell she'd picked up during her time in the big city. A familiar nun was also grateful. Anna had come home for summer break and made a short stop to see her parents before heading back to school. It was actually Grace, a close friend of hers, who had suggested the trip in the first place. She had once said, "Giving your parents a warm, happy smile is the best gift you can offer." When the bells struck noon, Anna lit up with excitement, already anticipating Grace's arrival. Yet, unknown to her, Grace was already nearby, quietly watching from a distance. As they neared the bakery, a strong gust swept past Grace and Josette. They paused, glancing through the glass, trying to figure out if the man inside was Anna's father. Kenza noticed how sharply the man moved, how focused and sharp his gaze was. Even from this side of the window, it was clear. Anna's father was a craftsman through and through. Josette's stomach let out a loud growl, and she quickly apologized, but Grace simply smiled, saying that the mouth-watering scent coming from the bakery could tempt anyone. Just then, a pink-haired woman, likely older, praised Grace's kind words warmly. Recognizing her instantly, Kenza responded courteously, though clearly flustered. Anna's mother handed them cone-shaped pastries filled with chocolate cream, and Josette happily devoured hers, eyes sparkling. The mother explained that they created the pastry after hearing stories about Grace. Grace was taken aback, unsure how the mother even knew who she was. But the woman just chuckled, saying there couldn't be more than one refined young lady who'd make her way to their humble little shop. She added that Anna had been writing constantly about Grace. Every letter was filled with things like, "Lady Grace this," and "Lady Grace that." Kenza remembered that Anna loved writing letters, but he figured he should probably tell her not to share too much of his personal life going forward. Either way, reading about Grace's gorgeous golden curls had inspired the mother to design a pastry that resembled them. Grace quickly blurted out that they were called chocolate cornets, though the mother didn't recognize the name, so Grace simply explained it was a name used in a distant Eastern kingdom. Grace still couldn't quite understand how Anna's mother had figured out she came from nobility. She thought her disguise as a merchant's daughter had been convincing, but the mother said it was plain to see. Grace's elegance and the quality of her tailoring made it obvious. In response, Grace pointed out that if the mother could read aristocratic behavior so easily and remain unbothered by it, she was probably once part of a noble family herself. The mother became visibly uneasy, brushing the idea off as nonsense, but it was clear to the others that she was lying and not doing a good job of hiding it. Just then, a loud cry echoed from the town square. They hurried over and saw a young boy trapped up high in a tree. Apparently, he'd climbed up to retrieve laundry carried off by the wind and was now stuck. Josette mentioned that beastkin children often got into these kinds of situations. They didn't always think ahead, and their strength made matters worse. A sudden gust knocked the boy off balance, but Anna swiftly used her wind magic to catch him in time. Grace then walked over to Anna, with barely a moment to explain why she was there alongside her mother. It turned out that Anna's wind magic wasn't ideal for getting the boy down. Casting a stronger spell indoors could cause serious damage. Grace briefly considered using a simple levitation spell, but the child was perched too high for her magic to reach. Then, noticing the nearby fountain, Anna's mother suddenly got an idea: rescue the boy using a chocolate cornet. She called out for the crowd to step back, announcing that 2-star pupils of the Royal Magic Academy, Grace and Anna, were on the case once again, oversharing. Anna unleashed a powerful whirlwind, and Grace joined in by directing water from the fountain, shaping it into a spiraling path of ice. Amplifying her voice with wind magic, Anna instructed the boy to slide down the icy spiral like a slide. Sure enough, he made it safely back into his mother's embrace. The townspeople erupted in cheers, proud of Anna and her heroic act. Kenza admired how far Anna had come with her magic, but his attention kept drifting back to her mother. The whole spiral idea, clearly inspired by that cone-shaped pastry, seemed far too clever for someone with no magical training. There had to be more to her past. She couldn't just be an average villager. This realization unsettled him, especially if her hidden identity played a key part in solving the game. Yet, she was just a civilian, and Kenza felt uneasy probing further into her private life. Meanwhile, when Anna redirected the crowd's gratitude to Grace Auvergne, the villagers were stunned that a noble would go out of her way for them. Grace thought Anna might have overdone it, but Anna beamed with pride, telling everyone that Lady Grace was going to help make the entire kingdom a better place. Naturally, the people's admiration for Grace skyrocketed. Back in the real world, Hinako was chatting with her mother about the upcoming school festival. It was a major event held shortly after summer break, much like the cultural festivals popular in Japanese high schools. In the original Un and B game, this was where Anna and her romantic lead typically bonded over a performance or activity, deepening their relationship. Predictably, this was also when Grace would usually make things difficult. She'd come up with excuses like, "It's too unorthodox," or "not respectable enough," to shoot down everyone's ideas for the event. So, when Grace reviewed a festival proposal for a maid cafe, most students assumed she would reject it outright for clashing with the Academy's noble image. But they were stunned to hear her say it was a splendid idea. Her reasoning: as nobles, they should learn to appreciate the contributions of maids, who were vital to everyday life. By simulating their work, students could gain a better understanding and deeper respect for them. Later, Prince Virgil and Pierre stopped by to hear her decisions. Up to that point, Grace had greenlit every single proposal. Pierre questioned whether she should be more selective. He found the maid cafe concept a bit too lowbrow. Grace acknowledged his viewpoint, but pointed out that fresh, original ideas often seemed inappropriate at first, simply because they didn't fit existing norms. Kenza compared it to how PTA groups in the real world tried to ban certain kids' shows, only for those very shows to become beloved for their creativity and bold humor. Virgil related it to how new music or artwork is often criticized when it first appears, only later gaining recognition. Just then, Lambert showed up with paperwork from a group of students who wanted to use the auditorium. As Grace prepared to head out, Pierre cautioned her, if anything went wrong, she'd be held accountable. But Grace accepted that without hesitation. "Noblesse oblige," she said. That to her was the duty of the aristocracy. The nearby girls couldn't help but gush over how admirable she seemed in that moment. But there was more beneath the surface. Kenza could tell from his internal thoughts that if Grace's reputation took a big enough hit, it could dissolve her engagement to the prince, and that would leave the door open for Anna to marry Virgil instead. The mother was stunned at how quickly he'd worked out a backup route. He truly was a hardcore gamer. The student council had been going at it nonstop all morning. Lucas asked if they'd finally picked an activity for the campus festival. It was still undecided. Grace reminded Anna that tradition dictated the first-year valedictorian should choose what the student council would do, but Anna struggled. She'd never attended a campus festival before and didn't even know where to begin. Grace then noted that their older student council members were incredibly well-liked, so whatever they did should feature them prominently. That sparked an idea in Anna's mind: to put on a play. She recalled a festival from her hometown where they performed a story about a prince who, after a series of odd events, becomes friends with a commoner, and the two end up switching bodies through a magic spell, leading to all sorts of chaos. Kenza chuckled internally. Such identity swap tales were staples of fairy tales, and he thought it was a fun concept. Lucas then brought up a quirky tradition. Student council members performing in plays had to abide by a unique rule. For instance, instead of playing instruments the usual way, they had to move them using magic. He wasn't sure of the specifics, but the rule existed to make things harder for council members, since they were considered top-tier students. Later that evening, Grace was having dinner with her father and telling him how things were going at school. Her stories made him reminisce about his own campus festival days, when he'd also had to make sure everything ran smoothly. Then their butler interrupted to share some news. A letter had arrived from the Duchess, who'd been recovering at the villa. She was doing well and would be returning soon. That got Kenza thinking. He hadn't even met Jacqueline yet, and it made him anxious. He feared her motherly instincts might somehow pick up on the subtle shift in Grace's behavior. As they kept chatting into the evening, Duke Auvergne revealed an interesting fact. The unique student council rule for performances had been invented by none other than the Duchess herself. She came up with it during her time as student council president, and it ended up making their play a massive hit. The tradition stuck ever since. Anna was floored to learn the rule involved gender-swapping roles. A girl had to act as the prince, and a boy had to portray the princess. Kenza thought that was a pretty tall order, but they didn't have much choice. It was a rule created by Grace's own mother. Hanako already knew about the cross-gender casting rule from the original game, but this extra backstory, that the villainess's mother had established it, was completely new. Interestingly enough, Grace's mother never even appeared in the original game. Hinako's mom, on the other hand, was thrilled at the idea of handsome boys dressing as girls. Hinako was just as excited. Grace found herself imagining Richard and August in drag, and it wasn't exactly flattering. Their broad shoulders would ruin the look, But Anna thought Virgile and Pierre could pull it off beautifully. Lambert, with his calm demeanor, would make a very elegant, scholarly type. Then they pictured Lucas running in. He'd be the cutest of them all, a perfect natural for the role. Anna started panicking after learning she'd have to play the prince, but the moment she remembered Grace would be cross-dressing too, her anxiety vanished, replaced by uncontainable excitement. If Grace was in, then Anna was all in as well. The student council was working hard to get everything finalized for the campus festival. Grace was pushing everyone to their limits. There was no time to fall behind. But someone was missing. They realized Anna hadn't been seen in a while. Grace checked the library and found her slumped over, completely drained. She'd spent the entire day studying books on stage productions to understand how plays worked. She'd lost track of time and collapsed from hunger. Anna was taken to the infirmary, and Grace made sure she was properly cared for. But Anna felt awful, both physically and emotionally. She hadn't realized how complex a stage play could be. There was so much more involved than just lines and actors, scripts, directors, costumes, stagehands, lighting, sound, props, sets. It overwhelmed her. Wanting to help, she tried starting on the script, but despite all the books she read, writing it was just too difficult. In tears, she called herself a failure. Grace tried to comfort her, acknowledging that stage productions really were intricate and tough to manage. She apologized sincerely. She hadn't meant for things to end up like this. Though she'd asked Anna to oversee the play, she never expected her to handle everything solo. Kenza regretted not anticipating this. Knowing Anna's personality, he should have realized she'd push herself too far. Trying to reassure her, he offered a phrase: "Let the cobbler stick to his last." Or in simpler terms, leave the baking to the baker. To fix things, they met with the president of the theater club, hoping to find someone with experience in writing plays. That's when they were introduced to Francette, who froze upon seeing Grace. She turned out to be a huge fan of the student council. When prompted to introduce herself, Francette immediately dropped to the floor in exaggerated reverence, begging them not to harm her family. Clearly, she had a flair for drama. Once they explained the situation, Francette wasn't sure she was qualified to help. But the club president reassured them she was easily the most talented in their group, and since their club revolved around upperclassmen, it made sense for her to collaborate with the student council. Anna was amazed to learn Francette was also a first-year student who had already earned such respect through her deep knowledge of theater. Francette tried to act modest until Anna mentioned the play would involve cross-gender casting. Instantly, she switched gears, now fully committed, ready to be worked like a pack mule if it meant helping. As they got started, Anna was shocked to find out Francette had read every single school play. She even handed them a fully stage-adapted version of the one they wanted to do, bringing Anna to tears of sheer relief. This was exactly what Kenza had meant by letting the baker bake the bread. It brought back memories of when he had to rely on skilled professionals to make up for what he didn't know. And that's also how he'd first met his future wife. He believed relying on the strengths of others was the real secret to making any major endeavor succeed. Francette was taken aback. Though Grace stood far above her in rank, she felt a strange sense of familiarity between them. Anna remarked that the cast and dialogue in the script felt oddly perfect, almost as if the play had been written for the current student council members. Yet the dates listed showed it was written 3 decades ago. Maybe those earlier council members had similar traits. However, Francette noticed something peculiar. This script had never been staged before. When they looked at the name of the playwright, Grace recognized it immediately. It was her mother, Jacqueline. That's when Francette officially joined their group. According to Hanako, Francette was meant to be Anna's best friend, the one she was supposed to meet right after the entrance ceremony. With Anna dressed in costume, Francette couldn't contain her excitement. She pulled out one of the newest magical gadgets, a camera, and started snapping tons of photos. Hanako remembered this device acted like the screenshot function in the original game. Then Pierre entered the room in a maid outfit, and Francette had a full-blown nosebleed. When Prince Virgile appeared looking absolutely regal, she practically exploded with joy. The boys joked around, never thinking they'd look this queenly before actually becoming kings. But Francette was clearly loving every second of it. We also learned that all the costumes were meticulously hand-stitched by the Auvergne family's personal tailors. Poor Virgil was struggling though. His hips and lower back were aching from the outfit, but he had no choice but to endure. Grace took the lead in explaining the plot. Anna would play Toby, a poor peasant boy, while Grace would take on the role of Edmund, the kingdom's crown prince. Though born on the exact same day, their upbringings were worlds apart. Richard was cast as Toby's frail mother. One day, Toby happened upon the gates of the palace and met Prince Edmund. The two struck up a conversation. The prince yearned for the experience of a commoner's life, while Toby dreamed of living in a castle. That's when Fee, a mischievous fairy, appeared and used her magic to switch their bodies before vanishing. As Toby in the prince's body explored the kingdom, he was captured by a shady merchant who tried to sell him off. Desperate, he declared his true identity and was rescued by Marielle, a war-hardened noblewoman returning from battle. Back at the palace, the queen fell gravely ill. Before losing her strength, she tried to pass on the throne to the prince. But behind the scenes, her younger sister Simone was plotting a coup, believing her own son was more worthy of the crown. With only 2 weeks left until the festival, the council hadn't even begun rehearsals. That's because Francette was busy revising the script at Grace's request. A week later, Kenza realized a new challenge. He had to portray two versions of the same character, the real Prince Edmund, and Edmund's body controlled by Toby. While he had no trouble playing the regal prince, he struggled with Toby's persona. His speech kept coming out too refined and proper. The elegance granted by his cheat made it difficult to sound like a humble peasant. One evening, after meeting with the girls, Grace's father handed her a letter from her mother. Jacqueline was thrilled to hear that her old play would finally be performed, and even announced she'd be attending in person. The pressure instantly skyrocketed. Kenza vowed to dedicate all his free time to memorizing lines, but with the festival approaching, every student became busier and busier. The student council was especially overwhelmed with their responsibilities. It looked like the event would begin before they ever got the chance to rehearse together. Though the campus festival was meant to be a joyful celebration, Kenza's nerves were clearly getting the better of him. He was determined to squeeze in every moment of practice that he could. Even so, Mrs. Dole would still spot them and call out happily. A loud bang suddenly echoed. It turned out the Earth Magic Enthusiasts Club was staging a live golem battle. Grace stepped in quickly, reminding them that magic demonstrations weren't allowed outside the approved zones. The club members tried explaining it was meant to attract new recruits, but their golem was swiftly dismantled by Grace's father. After giving them a light reprimand, the boys panicked and apologized profusely. From a distance, Gisette heard what sounded like a party nearby. Since the area was supposed to be performance-free, Grace and Anna rushed off to ensure the rules were followed. Watching them go, Duke Auvergne and his butler noted how much Grace resembled a young Jacqueline. The Duke then noticed Anna's mother, who quickly bowed and subtly signaled him to keep quiet. Down the hall, Grace and Anna walked calmly after halting the unsanctioned act. Kenza smiled to himself, reminded of how he once performed impromptu skits during his university festivals. With just an hour left before their own stage play, he still felt the urge to polish things one last time. Francette welcomed them as she opened the council room door, where the rest of the boys awaited their arrival. They all acknowledged the immense effort Grace had put into making the play happen. Grace bowed and apologized, saying she still struggled with certain lines. Prince Virgil noticed how hard it was for her to adopt a commoner's way of speaking. He reassured her gently, saying no one would fault her, knowing her upbringing had ingrained noble speech deeply in her. Kenza appreciated his maturity and kindness, especially for someone his age. Nobody expected a flawless performance. What mattered was giving their all. The theater was packed. From the crowd, Kenza and Anna saw Grace's parents seated together. Lucas walked up and mentioned he had spoken to Duchess Jacqueline earlier, but before he could explain, the bell rang. It was showtime. The curtains rose with Anna's opening. Virgil was ready to help with her lines using wind magic if needed, but Grace quietly told him not to interfere. Anna delivered her monologue perfectly, embodying a cheerful commoner boy with ease. The crowd was immediately drawn in. She had the energy and charisma fit for a lead role. Kenza often forgot he was meant to be the villainess in this story, so he had no urge to grab the spotlight. He let Anna shine while he played his supporting part. When he appeared as the kingdom's prince, he nailed every line. They reached the moment where characters swapped their societal roles. Lucas then made a dramatic entrance as a dazzling fairy, making the audience burst into delighted squeals. Bert added flair using his Rose Tempest spell, and Anna, now portraying a prince in a peasant's body, delivered her lines convincingly. However, when Grace stepped up for her turn, she couldn't quite portray the commoner boy's carefree nature, leaving the audience a bit unsettled. Lucas then cleverly improvised. With a dramatic flair, He claimed he had cast a bonus spell that made the commoner boy speak like a prince, neatly justifying Grace's refined speech. It was a brilliant save that kept the play flowing seamlessly. But credit didn't belong to him alone. It turned out Duchess Jacqueline had slipped him a note earlier, advising him to use that exact line. Kenza was quietly stunned by her foresight. Could she have known about the elegant cheat? It seemed likely. After all, it was strange enough that the play had been written more than 30 years ago. On stage, Prince Virgil played a stately queen with elegance and composure. Pierre took on the role of a seasoned maid, and Auguste appeared as a brave and noble dame. Every character felt tailor-made for the current members of the student council. It couldn't be coincidence. Kenza began to suspect that Jacqueline possessed a spell that allowed her glimpses into the future. In the audience, the Duke smiled, praising his daughter's spectacular performance. He turned to his wife, declaring that Grace was truly their pride and joy. Overwhelmed, Jacqueline shed a tear. Her husband noticed. Something was definitely going on. The play reached its emotional peak when Lucas performed the soul-switching spell to return the boys to their rightful bodies. The crowd erupted in cheers and tears, deeply moved by the heartfelt finale. Backstage, Grace thanked the team for their hard work. But the others turned the praise right back at her. They believed it was Grace who had made the performance so magical. She responded with humility, telling them it was a day she'd never forget. One by one, every member's affection level quietly ticked upward. Later that evening, her father personally congratulated her for the incredible show. When Grace asked where her mother was, he told her Jacqueline had to leave on urgent business, but had left behind a letter. "My darling Grace, I'm sorry I couldn't see you in person, but I thought your play was fantastic. I couldn't be more proud of you. I'm especially happy to see you surrounded by such wonderful people. No matter what challenges lie ahead, I know you'll overcome them, because you're not alone. Work together with your friends. And always remember, I'm thinking of you." In a moving scene, Jacqueline sat in her carriage, getting gently scolded by a magic orb for not staying to see her daughter. She defended herself. She wanted nothing more than to wrap Grace in hugs and kisses. But the timing wasn't right. If they met now, their careful plan would fall apart. Meanwhile, Hinako was disappointed that the game ended without the expected meeting between Grace and her mother. After the festival, there should have been a special after-party event. One where you'd watch fireworks with your top love interest. Anna scoured the campus, searching for Grace, and Kenza, well aware of her feelings, chose to stay out of sight. He believed this fireworks moment would determine who Anna's heart leaned toward, and he hoped it wouldn't be Grace. He wanted her to fall for one of the boys instead. Anna confided in the other council members that she couldn't find Grace. With only 30 minutes left before the fireworks show began, they split up to search. As Anna looked desperately, memories of her time with Grace flooded back. When the show finally began, she stood with the rest of the student council. Still no sign of Grace. But Prince Virgil noticed something odd. The fireworks were red and blue. At their academy, the colors reflected the caster's magic attribute, meaning Grace had to be the one launching them. Kenza, unaware of who Anna ended up watching the show with, figured the intimacy between her and someone must be rising. What he didn't realize was that all of the council's affection meters were steadily rising, but only for Grace. He still didn't understand why he'd been reincarnated into this strange world. But if nothing else, his role as the villainess seemed destined to support these young students who called this place home. Thanks for watching. Check out this next video, and remember to subscribe Annie Zap.